more people allowed back to the office from next week, experts tell us it's an opportunity to rethink work culture and our way of working.
Welcome to Ang Teng Fong General Hospital. Please proceed.
Hospitals in Singapore are deploying robots to welcome visitors and also beef up security.
And say hello to Joyo, a Celebes crested macaque. He's the newest addition to the Singapore Zoo. A very good evening. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman.
I'm Dylan Ang. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
We begin with the latest on the COVID-19 situation in Singapore. Now, there are 0 community cases among the 15 new infections confirmed today. It's the 8th time this month that no community cases were reported, but there were 5 imported cases, all of whom were placed on stay-home notices upon their arrival here. More details will be announced tonight.
From Monday, September 28th, more employees will be allowed to return to the workplace with safe management measures in place. Employers are encouraged to enable flexible working hours and staggered reporting times. They must also ensure that employees continue to work from home for at least half their working time, and no more than half of such employees are at the workplace at any point in time.
Events within the workplace like seminars, corporate retreats and annual general meetings will also be allowed to resume as long as safe distancing measures are in place. However, work-related events at external venues remain prohibited for now. Let's discuss this further with Associate Professor Josip. Now, he is the Director of the Centre for Population Health Sciences at Nanyang Technological University's Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine. Hi, Professor. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. Professor, so more restrictions will be relaxed with more employees allowed to return to the office. Why is now a good time to do so, and what are the factors that have been considered?
So, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this question. It's certainly a low and stable case count so far in the community, as well as the daily migrant worker cases have largely dropped consistently, and showing that situation is indeed strongly under control, and this gives us first a strong impetus for a change. And the second is that this is in large part due to really everyone playing their part. Whether that's policymaker, healthcare workers, or the man on the street. And we could also say all the enforcement working well to clamp down on the flouters who can lead to potential transmission clusters. Now, in terms of what are the factors that have been considered, we really need to say that there's a wide range of other factors that have been certainly considered, not least wider societal impact of the measures, including the economic impact, as well as impact on mental health, etc.
Now, Professor, what could be the possible pitfalls, with more workers allowed back at the office, and what are your recommendations for companies to do this safely?
So, social distancing is, of course, something to be rigorously managed. We know that not just in Singapore, but across the world, in a number of countries, we had incidences of clusters of outbreaks and potential super spreading events where a large group of people are packed in a closed ventilation space, such as offices often are. So in that sense, spacing between people will be paramount, and interaction between people to be managed, and then essentially considering how we can reorganize the space for this new way of working to maintain the measures which keep the infection at bay and certainly prevent the spread. I would say also it's important to reconsider the company culture. This is an opportunity to think how we can keep the culture of collaboration despite social distancing, and also in relation to establishing new norms of working whilst not losing all the benefits of the interactions that office work bring.
Right. Professor, moving away from the workplace, with more people expected to go out during the year-end school holidays and to spend the tourism vouchers given out by the government. What are some concerns that you might have with the increase in leisure activities?
So I think it's important to state that we are continuously learning about the pandemic and how to effectively manage it. In that sense, also, this new phase of opening provides incredible opportunities for learning which interventions are effective, which needs strengthening, and which ones are perhaps increasing the risk of the infection and pandemic again increasing in Singapore. Now, what we can see very clearly is that the government is showing that it understands not only the medical aspect and impact, but also equally economic and wider societal impact. So in that sense, I think similar to concerns to workplace opening up with internal tourism, and this will be obviously all the audience will be Singaporeans in Singapore. There is an opportunity here to support business, but also for collective vigilance on social distancing, venue disinfection, etc.
Now, Education Minister Lawrence Wong also shared that the government is working on charting out a roadmap to Phase 3, where there will be a further easing of restrictions. Now, what are the factors to consider before Singapore can see Phase 3 happening?
So it's really important to consider that we are in a new next normal, as we call it, and we are all adapting to this. So in a way, we are reevaluating how we have been living, and many of these measures will need to stay with us. For example, keeping the distance of 1 or 2 meters between ourselves. Border control would be very critical in the new normal. And I would say Phase 3 will not look like Phase 2, neither will it be anything like the pre-COVID. Going forward, we need to reevaluate everything. And this is an opportunity for digital transformation of companies, as the government has been strongly pushing for, and in fact, reminding all of us that this challenge should be turned into opportunity.
Well, thank you, Professor, for coming on to the show. We were speaking to Associate Professor Josip, Director of the Center for Population Health Sciences at NTU's Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine.
In other local headlines, the Ministry of Defence said today that the 6 Singapore Armed Forces servicemen who had been charged in military court over the death of full-time national serviceman Dave Lee in 2018 have been sentenced. The 6 servicemen, 2 regulars and 4 operationally ready national servicemen, were fined between $1,800 and $4,500 each. 3 of them were also demoted from the rank of 3rd Sergeant to Corporal. Corporal First Class Dave Lee died in 2018 due to heat stroke.
Meanwhile, MINDEF said the number of heat injury cases in the Army has declined by 40% in the past 2 years, and there have been no cases of heat stroke. It added that the SAF has introduced enhancement to an existing heat injury management and prevention measures since the death of NSF Dave Lee. These include implementing a simplified evacuation protocol, improving heat injury awareness for commanders and medics, enhancing existing cooling and heat injury prevention measures, and strengthening an open reporting culture.
According to a coroner's inquiry, a COVID-19 patient who was found motionless at the 3rd floor of Khoo Teck Puat Hospital in April had fallen from height and died due to the injuries he sustained. The findings were revealed after an autopsy showed that construction worker Mr Alaga Perikatan, an Indian national, had injuries such as a ruptured heart, fractured ribs and bleeding over the surface of the brain. There was no evidence to indicate that his death was caused by pneumonia.
Singapore's total population has fallen to 5.69 million as of June, a drop of 0.3% from last year. The main reason, a fall in the number of foreigners holding employment passes and S-passes due to the economic impact of COVID-19. The data was released by the National Population and Talent Division today.
In a Facebook post today, President Halimah Yaakob said both GIC and Temasek have taken steps to cushion themselves from the impact of COVID-19 but will continue to position themselves for future opportunities. She had received a briefing by the Sovereign Wealth Fund, GIC, and investment company Temasek Holdings on the investment outlook. She added that the annual briefings are useful for her to engage both entities on their market outlook, which is a main factor in their projection of expected long-term returns.
Visitors to Ng Teng Fong Hospital will soon find themselves greeted by robots and using touchless lifts.
These smart security personnel and contactless solutions are just one of the many high-tech systems introduced by the National University Health System to various hospitals starting next month. Multimedia journalist Chian has more.
Welcome to Ng Teng Fong General Hospital. Please proceed.
Kenobi here is one of the new smart colleagues that the healthcare workers here at Ng Teng Fong Hospital can soon expect to work alongside.
Please approach the staff on duty.
From Certis, this is another member of the hospital group's ultra-modern security team. And these two will be taking on the role of protecting the hospital and its staff starting in October. From temperature taking, safe entry to spotting suspicious objects. The security and concierge robots will also detect visitors and patients who are not wearing masks or following social distancing rules and deny these non-compliant visitors entry. To be gradually deployed across the various hospitals under the National University Health System, including Jurong Community Hospital, Alexandra Hospital and the National University Hospital. These robots will be supported by a team of drones, which will look after the hospital from the outside, surveilling the facades for suspicious activity or possible safety hazards such as leaks and damaged roofs.
Hospitals are important assets, and there's this continual need to make it safer, smarter, and of course greener. By leveraging on technology and IoT and AI, it helps us to drive efficiency, productivity, safety. For the drones, it replaced a conventional way of putting up gondolas, scaffolding to do building inspection. All right, it is expensive, time-consuming, and to a certain extent not so accurate. By using drones, you can reach out to any parts of the building, take photos, and it gets transmitted to the engineers. And if there are problems to fix immediately, we can do it.
The use of technology will also help the hospital be less reliant on manpower and allow for better efficiency and safety.
COVID-19 actually surfaced a very challenging issues, the dependence on manpower. By leveraging on this technology, again, it improved efficiency. At the same time, it lessened the need for manpower. And to us in NUHS, this is something that's pretty important.
Taking the hospital to new heights, literally, the facilities management team here at Ng Teng Fong Hospital is using technology not just for security, but also to help with disease control. So such as with these touchless lifts like this one. Using technology to save time and save money, the healthcare group hopes that the use of such smart technologies will also allow for them to free up staff for value-added roles such as analysis of footage or emergency response, all while keeping them safe. Chian for the Straits Times.
Across the causeway, Malaysian Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin says he is still the country's legitimate leader and that his Perikatan Nasional government remains firmly in control. This as he responded to claims by opposition Anwar Ibrahim, who said he had a strong, formidable, convincing majority of MPs to form a new government and that the government of Mr Muhyiddin had collapsed.
Calling on Malaysians to remain calm, Mr Muhyiddin went on to challenge Mr Anwar to prove his assertion. In a separate statement, the coalitions and parties that back the PN administration said the government has remained intact and rejected the claim that some lawmakers had jumped to support Mr Anwar.
He went on to state that Mr Anwar's claims are, quote, no more than a repeat of cheap publicity that has been carried out many times before.
What does this mean for Malaysia? Joining us to discuss more is Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teoh. Hello Shannon. Now Mr Anwar seems quite confident in making this bold claim. Does he really have the support that he claims to have?
Well, if you're a follower of Malaysian politics, we've been here before. Anwar is a very charismatic politician, so he sounds very convincing every time he makes these claims. But he's done that before In 2008, he said he would get 30 people to defect from Perikatan Nasional to form government. In 2013, he said he had won the elections. And also recently in February this year, he said he had the majority. And all three times, that didn't turn out to be the case, or he would claim to have been foiled. So most observers are taking this new claim with a pinch of salt. But I'll tell you that it's a bit different now because the government has a very slim majority. Prime Minister Muhyiddin's majority in parliament can be undone if he loses 2 MPs. Now that's a lot closer than it's ever been. So people are taking this threat, this warning, a bit more seriously than before. But Anwar has a history of making this proclamation but then not following through.
Right, let's talk about the other party. Now, the last time you were on, we spoke about how Muhyiddin Yassin's Perikatan Nasional proved a majority in parliament, although it was a razor-thin margin of only 2 votes. Has the support for his administration changed since, Shannon?
It feels like a very long time since I've been here, so I'm not sure what I actually said then. But the support level hasn't changed. It's still 113 to 109. Now, if it could have changed, right, in the interim period. Anwar is claiming that it has. That's what his press conference on Wednesday was all about, that there are people who have left Tan Sri Muhyiddin's Perikatan Nasional government. But on paper, that hasn't happened. And on our checks with various politicians, MPs, party leaders, no one seems to be able to ascertain where Anwar has gotten these MPs from. There is a suggestion that a section of UMNO might have been amenable to Anwar becoming Prime Minister. If you looked at UMNO President Zahid Hamidi's statement yesterday, he seems to indicate that many MPs in UMNO are of the opinion that they should support Anwar. But again, we don't know who these people are. No one has actually come forward with a list of names of who these MPs are. Does it include Zahid himself? Nobody knows.
Now, the Sabah election is, of course, taking place this weekend. You've written that the state election does not directly affect which coalition forms Malaysia's federal government, but it is a bellwether of where voter loyalties lie. Could you elaborate on this in the light of a possibility of a snap election being called for Malaysia?
Well, a couple of things. Sabah is home to 25 parliamentary seats, 26 if you count the federal territory of Labuan. So that's more than 10% of parliament. Now, that's pretty significant if you take it as a sample size. If you are going to win Sabah, that's going to give you quite a good head start in terms of getting to the magic 112, which gives you a majority of parliament. The other thing is that the issues in Sabah are a real test for what's been happening in Malaysia. You know, the whole world's been going through this COVID problem, how it's affected the economy, public health, you know, and there is a big question here about whether the government has handled it well. The economy, bread and butter issues, you know, that's at the top of the agenda for Sabah, just like it would be anywhere else in Malaysia. So that really kind of indicates if they feel the Muhyiddin administration has performed well in the 6 months that it's been in power. Now, if they call a snap election quickly after this, you would say that the economic conditions are quite similar everywhere else in Malaysia. If Muhyiddin is going to wait maybe another 6 months or a year down the road, then maybe Sabah doesn't tell us so much. So if there is a snap election, the results of Sabah could indicate quite strongly kind of the mood. But again, we should not read too much into this. Sabah politics is a bit different from how it is in Peninsular Malaysia. Now, Peninsular Malaysia is home to 165 seats, and that largely decides who is going to be in federal government. Sabah has certain elements of state nationalism. They believe that the federal government hasn't treated them right, hasn't given them enough infrastructure, has ignored their security concerns. We know in 2013 there was an invasion, which many feel was bungled by the government back then. So it matters, but it doesn't matter too much. If you lose the Sabah elections, it doesn't mean that you will necessarily lose the national elections, but it does give you a good hint as to how the sentiment lies.
All right. Well, thank you, Shannon, so much for taking the time to speak with us. Always a pleasure to have you on. We've been speaking to Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teoh. In other global headlines, Jack Ma is no longer the richest person in China. The Alibaba co-founder was overtaken by Zhong Shanshan, a businessman who controls two companies that went public this year, which boosted his fortune. According to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, Mr. Zhong is now $2 billion richer than Mr. Ma.
There are fresh doubts whether a deal between TikTok owner ByteDance and two US firms will go ahead. Later today, TikTok's lawyers will ask a US court to block President Donald Trump from banning the app, arguing that the move is based on election politics rather than legitimate national security concerns. Meanwhile, China's state-run media has denounced the deal with Oracle and Walmart as an American trap and a, quote, dirty and underhanded trick. Last weekend, the two companies agreed to take 20% of a new standalone US company called TikTok Global.
Ahead of the US elections on November 3rd, President Trump has refused to commit to a peaceful transfer of power if he loses to Democrat Joe Biden. Mr. Trump also thinks the election result could end up in the US Supreme Court and again cast doubt on postal voting.
Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
Time magazine has released its list of the 100 most influential people of 2020. The annual list, which is not ranked, honors individuals who have had the most significant impact on the global landscape that year and includes heads of state, business leaders, athletes and entertainers, among others. The magazine broke up their list into 5 categories, namely pioneers, artists, leaders, titans and icons. Among the notable names who made the list were Dr. Anthony Fauci, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, Tsai Ing-wen, founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, Lewis Hamilton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, The Weeknd, and Bong Joon-ho.
Now, if you are heading to the zoo this weekend, look out for this little guy. Born in July, Joyo is the latest addition to the zoo's troupe of critically endangered Celebes crested macaques. They are very social creatures. Now, Joyo, which means victorious in Indonesia, is said to be extremely active and can often be seen trying to emulate his older brother Agung.
What a cutie. Now, these macaques are one of 7 distinct species found on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi and its neighbouring islands. And those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Dylan Ang. Join us tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.